America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. City Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Cooper?
Here.
Councilmember Beaton?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
Here.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Here.
Mayor Smith?
Here.
And Councilmember Grabowski?
Here.
City Manager?
Here.
City Attorney?
Here.
DPW Director? Here. Finance Director? Here. Planning and Zoning Director? Here. Public Safety Director? Here. City Engineer?
Thank you. Public hearings, we have none. Citizen comments on agenda-related items. This is an opportunity for citizens to speak on items that are on the agenda for tonight's session. If you wish to speak to an agenda item, please come forward, state your name and address, and limit your comments to 5 minutes. Are there any citizens that wish to speak to agenda-related items? If not, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All agenda items marked with an asterisk are on the consent agenda and considered by the city manager to be routine in matter. Prior to approval of the consent agenda, any member of council may have an item from the consent agenda removed and taken up during the regular portion of the meeting. Consent agenda items include approval of minutes, payroll, invoices, notification regarding the next work session. At this time, council could take action to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski, a second by Councilmember Grabowski. Is there any discussion? City Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton?
Yes.
Mayor Smith?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Unfinished business. Consideration of approving an amendment to Republic Services contract to include curbside recycling. This item was tabled from the December 19, 2017 meeting and further discussed at the council work session on January 9, 2017. The City of Manistee offers recycling at a drop-off site in the industrial park. City Council has asked Republic Services for a proposal to close the drop-off site and move to curbside recycling. Each refuse customer would be supplied with a 96-gallon cart to be emptied 2 times each month. The estimated new cost of this service would be $2.76 a month for each customer. If approved, the program switch would have a July 2018 estimated start date. At this time, council could take action to approve the contract amendment with Republic Services to include curbside recycling program and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the documents.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski and a second by Councilmember Cooper. Is there any discussion?
The only thing I want to say is that I have polled a lot of people, and my vote will be determined on what I heard from the taxpayer.
Any other comments? City Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Grabowski?
No.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
No.
Councilmember Beaton?
No.
Councilmember Cooper?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
No.
Mayor Smith?
No.
Failed.
Thank you. New business. Consideration of increasing Acumed group billing rates for the fire department. The Manistee Fire Department works with Acumed Group for billing purposes for advanced life support services. The amount the fire department assigns to billing for services is analyzed annually. The current fees have not changed in more than 2 years. In examining current rates, the suggested fees, the fee schedules associated with Medicare, Medicaid, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, Deputy Chief Darling and Chief Gozo have recommended to raise the EMS rates in 3 areas. This reflects the current increase in vehicle fuel, vehicle maintenance, cost of medical supplies, and personnel costs. At this time, council could take action to approve the Acumid group billing rates for the City of Manistee Fire Department.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Councilmember Goodspeed and a second by Councilmember Beaton. Is there any discussion?
I have some questions, either to the city manager or whoever. Tim? What impact, is this going to increase our revenue, or is this, how is this,
Yes, I
we
think,
get more from Medicare or Blue Cross, or?
no, those are straight line averages that we were given as far as Medicare, Medicaid, and Blue Cross. With the added rates, which I will comment, we're still below the average what we have for the area for the county as far as the other ambulance services in the county, even with our proposed rates raised, but it will give us approximately about 15 grand minimally extra revenue from here on out.
Okay, can I just run by you what I heard the policy to be a few years ago and see if it's still that way? When it comes to EMS, if you live in the city and you need transport, you're going to be transported, and if you don't have insurance because you live in the city, it's free.
That I do not know the answer. You two have any knowledge on that?
That is correct. From what I understand, you will receive a bill. If you have insurance, then your insurance will pick that up. If you do not have insurance, you will not be sent to collections to pay that bill.
Okay, and if your insurance only pays a certain portion of that, the same applies, right?
From what I understand, yes, sir.
Okay.
Does that apply also to people outside the city?
No.
Thank you.
And it wouldn't apply to people traveling through or people visiting?
You have to be a city resident.
When we say resident, are we talking about renters and owners of property?
I believe so, yes. You're considered a resident if you reside here, yes.
Okay, what you're telling me, I don't think things have changed. I think they're still the same as they were before. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? City Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton?
Yes,
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
Yes,
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Mayor Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of a FEMA grant application by the fire department for extrication equipment. Applications are being accepted for 2017 FEMA firefighters grant cycles. Grant applications are due February 2nd, 2018. The fire department is requesting authorization to apply for a grant in the amount of $50,000. The cost would cover purchase of extrication equipment and training for the department. If successful, the city would be responsible for the 5% grant match of $2,500 and the cost of the grant writer at 5% or $2,500. Bids would be solicited for the equipment if the grant is received. At this time, council could take action to authorize the submission of a FEMA grant application in the amount of $50,000 with a submission fee of $500, a city match of $2,500, and $2,500 cost for the grant writer if the grant is awarded.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski, a second by Councilmember Goodspeed. Is there any discussion?
yes, I have a couple questions. Why don't we have someone on staff who can write the grant? Why do we need to go get a grant writer to write it? I thought we did a lot of these grants in-house.
It's my understanding that the FEMA grant, for a number of years, we've enlisted the aid of a grant writer. It goes back to when the previous public safety director, Bachman, took over the fire department. They had been unsuccessful in obtaining FEMA grants. They had applied and not gotten any. So the director at that time elected to go with a grant writer, and they've been 100% successful in securing grants when they go after items that are in the very specific parameters of the grant The only times that they haven't is when they've tried to make something fit, and it really didn't fit, so they didn't get funded. So everyone that was within the program parameters that this gentleman has written for, we've received. And it was, they went that way because of the lack of success with in-house applications.
So we don't, I'm just proposing that, do we learn anything from their style of grant writing that perhaps we could do ourselves?
I don't know. It's my understanding, and I talked to previous Director Bachman about this specifically in the last couple of days. He says the grant writer, does it for other departments, very skilled at what he does and knows the people in the FEMA hierarchy, and has, that provides us with some certain benefits to having that kind of a relationship. The other thing to remember too is that in talking with Mr. Bachman, that he's been successful in receiving funding from the local revenue sharing board for our local match plus the grant writer's expense. So in essence, there's no money, no city money out of pocket in this, and it's increasing our likelihood of getting funded.
Okay, I just wanted to ask. I do have another question. It's on the equipment. I'm assuming that you got some bids from other places for comparable equipment
Correct.
of the Genesis. Did you know that Custer Township just bought the same equipment?
Custer Township?
Yep, in Mason County.
Not familiar.
It's just something fun to know, maybe. Not fun to know, but maybe worthwhile taking a look at their equipment since they have it.
We're looking at all options. We've actually had some equipment brought here. We've actually cut up a car with the equipment. It's what's going to be beneficial to our use and how we can store it and readily have it available.
Okay.
How many people will it take to operate this equipment?
One,
Just one person?
especially with the battery operated, which we're going to go to. Then we don't have to worry about the cords, the hydraulic. Our plan is to go to the battery operated, which when we were working with them here in the last couple of months, it was a one-man operation.
Is there anybody else in the area that has this equipment?
There is extrication.
Custer.
Yeah.
There is extrication equipment that is sprinkled throughout the county at different departments.
Does the sheriff's department have that? Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
The actual extrication rig, I guess you would say, was sold, and that money was utilized to buy additional equipment for volunteer fire departments throughout the county, trying to get it out farther so they have it available.
No.
That's all.
I took over it.
Any other questions about the equipment itself? I'd like to also comment, Mr. Saylor, I sent you the questions concerning the grant, and I would kind of echo Councilmember Beaton's comments. When I worked as a housing director at 5CAP, I wrote grants to state and federal government for hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're kind of boilerplate type of products and stuff, and I would think that over a period of time we'd have a collection of grants to look at and work from and save some expense. And I know there's the possibility that would be reimbursed for the expense, but all these grants that are out there are taxpayer money in some form. So anything that's saved is a benefit to someone else or someone else's needs, either through revenue sharing or through the FEMA grant process. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, understood.
Any other comments or questions? City Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Consideration of a FEMA grant application by the fire department for 2 heart monitors. Applications are being accepted for the 2017 FEMA firefighters grant cycle. Grant applications are due February 2nd, 2018. The fire department is requesting authorization to apply for a grant in the amount of $70,000. The cost would cover the purchase of 2 heart monitors for the department. If successful, the city would be responsible for the 5% grant match of $3,500 and the cost of the grant writer at 5% for $3,500. Bids would be solicited for the equipment if the grant is received. At this time, council could take action to authorize the submission of a FEMA grant application in the amount of $70,000 with a submission fee of $500. A city match of $3,500 and $3,500 cost for the grant writer if the grant is awarded.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski and a second by Councilmember Goodspeed. Is there any discussion?
I just have a quick question. It might be very obvious, but the grant writer's $3,500 cost for the grant writer, is that taken out of the grant, or is,
Out of the 70,000?
yes, I mean, is,
Correct.
does that come out of the 70,000?
Correct.
Okay.
Is that also recoverable? Are we gonna be able to recover that?
It has been in the past.
Plan is when the next cycle comes open to put in for that, yes.
I have a question about the equipment.
Yes.
As I read the attachments, the heart monitors we have now are refurbished units.
Yes.
And becoming a bit dated. As I understand, the life cycle is about 8 years on these. Is
Yes.
that true? Now we're looking at new equipment that should be much more reliable.
Much more reliable and last for the entire 8, hopefully.
Okay.
No, I don't.
And we need the 2 because we have 2 licensed ambulances.
Okay, do these units have capabilities we currently do not have, or, I mean,
I
is there
believe
new
they're gonna be
features?
identical to what we have.
Look at the heart.
Nothing new to it.
Okay.
More up-to-date model.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Thank you, Chief.
Hmm?
City Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Goodspeed,
Yes.
Mayor Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Notices, communications, a report from Manistee Blacker Airport. A regular part of each council meeting is a report from a cooperating agency, organization, or department. At this time, Mr. Barry Lind will report on the activities of Manistee Blacker Airport and respond to any questions the council may have regarding their activities.
Thank you. I'm realizing it's only 20 after. I don't think I've ever been up here only 20 minutes into your meeting, but I know you've got a longer night ahead of you, so I will try to be quick. I know I'm supposed to only take 10 minutes, and I don't think I've ever accomplished that, but we'll try. And
That'll help it.
That'll help.
Realize it was out of there.
yes, thank you.
So I go.
Okay, this past year, we worked with AES and we had an annual update to our strategic plan. Our current strategic plan is dated for a 5-year period through 2020. We're about halfway through that period. Just kind of wanted to reiterate some of the things from the airport strategic plan. Our mission statement, providing high quality and sustainable aviation services and facility. And the focus of that word sustainable there is really financially sustainable. And our vision, Manistee County Black Bear Airport will be instrumental to the economic well-being of the region. Our goals from our strategic plan, number one goal is using the airport for economic development. Goal number 2 is increased collaboration in the area. 3, focus on the infrastructure of the airport. And 4, make sure that we're building a good organization within the airport. Something that kind of ties into some of those economic goals. This past year, the State Aeronautics Commission released a document called the Michigan Air Service Plan. The last time this document had been updated was well over a decade ago. It's a 600-page document. And it really goes through every airport in the state and really talks about the state of each airport and how aviation in Michigan is currently sustained and supported. But what's also interesting is a good deal of this document went into the economic impacts of airports in the state, both locally and to the state economy as a whole. And as it relates to our airport, the state estimates that the economic impact of our airport is $101 million. Now, personally, I think that's exaggerated. Sometimes these reports can do that to numbers. But that's not me saying that. That's the state of Michigan through their consultants that are saying that. And just for comparison, if you look at surrounding airports, the Cadillac Airport is estimated at $34 million in impact, the Frankfurt Airport $1 million, Ludington Airport $7 million, and the Traverse City Airport just shy of $1 billion. So according to this report, we're about 1/10 of the impact of Traverse City's airport. Significant numbers, not all of which are directly to our county or our city, but carry on impact throughout the state. And this is detail on how some of those things came up as far as jobs that are impacted by the airport, and some of those numbers with that total being that $101 million. So on to specifics of the airport. In review from 2017, our airline service, we saw a total of 10,104 passengers this past year, which is up 8% from the prior year. And in 2016, we were up 7%. So we've had fairly consistent growth now the last 3 to 4 years of around 8% a year. I always show this. It kind of shows both where we are, where we want to be, and where we used to be, all in one top 5. So where we are, 2017, overall it was our second best year in the airport's history, and now we've had commercial service for about 55 or 56 years. And it shows that trend of steady growth, 15, 16, 17 being 2, 3, and 4 on that list. Where we want to be is that number 1 back in 2011 when we had Frontier here, and we overnight were up like 5-fold in passengers. But then also showing a little of the history. The previous best years, 5, 6, 7, are all in that late 1960s and early 1970s time period, which was early in the life cycle of the airport. I'll actually touch on some of those numbers a little bit later in the presentation. As our airline service goes, we're in the final year of a 4-year contract with US DOT, and North Country Sky, also known as Public Charters, is conducting our air service into Chicago Midway. The current contract and grant from US DOT ends on July 31st. So we're actually in the middle of the process for looking at what our air carrier will be come August 1st of this year. And I'll spend more time at the end of my presentation talking about that. Airline on-time performance and reliability continues to be good, although not as good as maybe 2 years ago. This past year, our cancellation rate was about 2%, which by industry standards is very good, especially for a small regional airport. However, every time we have a canceled flight, we all hear about it just because the recovery options when a flight is canceled, it's not as easy as, oh, you catch the next flight that's 2 hours later. For us, that may be you catch the next flight tomorrow, and that's much more difficult for passengers. So we strive in looking at working with our air carrier and looking at air carriers that number needs to be better than the industry average, because otherwise we're at a disadvantage being a small regional airport. Seasonal demand this past year has been handled very well with a combination of variation in frequency, adding extra flights, and or operating a larger aircraft. We have flexibility, especially around holidays and during the summer, to adjust our schedule to meet our demand. And our demand here is very seasonal. This past year, for the last couple years here, I've been talking about the sponsorship issue with the FAA that has finally come to conclusion, and therefore we are now eligible again for capital improvement grants through the FAA because that issue has been finally resolved. We completed a tree clearing project this past year on tribal land at the casino, and that's another project that was many years in the negotiation process because of the sovereignty concerns that the tribe has over their land and trees in particular. And for this coming year, we really have two projects planned. One is a property acquisition project to a property to our east, and the other is engineering design work for a runway resurfacing, which will be the following year. General slide on airport finances. We operate with a very small general fund balance, ranging between $0 and about $20,000. We have a capital improvement fund that's about $60,000. Our annual operating budget is around $400,000. And through the airport flows US DOT funds for our airline service of about $2.3 million a year. So overall, our budget is $2.7 million, but about $400,000 of that is the operating budget. And as our operating budget specifically, about 56% of that comes back to us as fees from the airline service. 19% various other things, rents, fuel, rental car fees, etc. And then about a quarter is our county contribution to the airport. When we get capital improvement funds from the FAA, it's a 95% FAA funded with a 5% local match that gets divided between us and the state. As I mentioned earlier, we are in the midst of our Essential Air Service selection process. This is a process that we go through every 2 or 4 years, depending on whether we do a 2-year contract or a 4-year contract. We've just done a 4-year contract, and we're coming up on the end of that, so we're going through the selection process. And the way that process works is as follows. US DOT releases an RFP for EAS service that they put out publicly and request airlines to propose responses to that. That went out just before Thanksgiving on November 22nd. Airlines were due to submit bids for service at Manistee by January 4th. And there's a comment period following the reception of bids where the airport and the community has the opportunity to basically review the bids and to make comments back to DOT. Ultimately, for Essential Air Service, DOT makes the selection, and they have a variety of criteria that they base that selection process on. So we are in the middle of that comment period. We had 3 responses to the RFP, and in addition to that, we have our current air carrier as a 4th. At our regular airport board meeting a week ago yesterday, we had presentations from 2 of those carriers. We have a meeting coming up this Thursday where we will have presentations from the remaining 2. And I will talk a little bit about that, but if anyone is interested in any more deeper information, those presentations are interesting, and the discussion around them explains a lot more details this process. You can find that on the PEG Commission's website, manisteetv.com. That last meeting was a 4-hour meeting, so I don't think it's going to actually be broadcast on the cable channel, but it is available online, as well as this Thursday's meeting will also be posted online. So this is a slide I referenced earlier. This shows a little bit more of where we've been over the last 17 years as far as passenger service. And I've talked kind of about the last few years where we've seen this kind of steady incremental growth, averaging just shy of 10% a year. We see the spike from Frontier in there, but we also then see where we were before that. And if you look at kind of the long-term trend and you take out Frontier year, you've really seen that over the last 15 years, we've gone from having about 2,500 passengers a year now up to 10,000. So we've quadrupled where we are over this time span. And many things have changed during that time. We've had many different carriers, different service points, Milwaukee, Chicago, etc. But I think that reflects broadly our community and our region in this state as from a desirability to be serviced by air transportation. Our goal is to make sure that we're continuing that trend, hopefully to the point where we can recover some of those peaks. The process that the board is going through to make their recommendation to DOT, back in November, we met at the regular board meeting, and basically the board came up with the following evaluation criteria that we're using to basically grade each of the proposals from each of the carriers. And these are in no particular order, they're just the order that the board came up with them. The board has yet to really weight and order them. But the first one here is sufficient capacity to handle the seasonal demand along with our projected growth. We want to make sure that we have, over the next contract period, enough capacity that we can continue to grow at that 10%, if not higher growth rate. And also to handle our seasonal demand. In July and August, we're typically doing about 4 times the number of passengers that we do in January and February. And therefore, something that's kind of a year-round same level of service may not work for us because of our seasonal demand issues. The board's goal is to have service by a twin-engine aircraft. The larger the aircraft, and jet aircraft are preferred versus smaller aircraft. A schedule that meets the needs of our flying passengers is also important. Pricing is also right up there in importance, such that we're not pricing ourselves out of the market, because it is certainly reasonable that while people in our immediate community will maybe pay the same rate as flying out of neighboring airports, it's a lot to expect them to pay more for that local convenience, but yet providing fewer options or less desirable equipment to operate on. The board went through and ranked their preference for hub options. As you may notice, our current service is into Midway. The board feels that moving to O'Hare would be in our best interest long-term to continue growth. with Detroit being a number 3 on that list. Reliability is very important, as I was talking about earlier. When we have issues, and there are issues with any mechanical type device, our ability to recover when we have a limited number of flights per day is challenged, and therefore we need to be at a reliability level above industry standards or industry averages, I would say. And then finally, the desirability of having interline and baggage agreements to make connection opportunities in the hub much simpler than they are today. Summary of the proposals that were submitted. We had a proposal from Air Choice 1, who has bid on us before. They actually submitted 2 different proposals, one with 2 round trips daily to O'Hare with a 9-seat twin-engine aircraft, another proposal with 3 round trips into O'Hare with that same aircraft. And in both proposals, they state that their intention would be to seasonally shift some of those flights around such that you may have fewer than 3 in the winter, more than 3 in the summer. Boutique Air also operates a 9-seat aircraft, a Pilatus aircraft. Their proposal was for 3 round trips, or 1,800. Technically, their proposal is 1,872 trips yearly. That ends up averaging to 3 a day. Also into O'Hare. Boutique presented to the board last Monday. Air Choice 1 will be here this Thursday. Great Lakes Aviation, who has formerly served our airport, is proposing 2 daily trips to Milwaukee with 30-seat equipment, an Embraer 120 aircraft. That's a twin-engine turboprop 30-seat aircraft. It's equivalent to what we've been operating here in the summers down into Midway with our current carrier. And then our current carrier is submitting a proposal to us for alternate essential air service, and I won't go into the differences between standard essential air service and alternate at this meeting, but their proposal basically would be similar to our current level of service into Midway or possibly O'Hare as fits our desires. And I believe that is my last slide. Any questions for the council?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the presentation, and I'm actually really pleased that we have 4 proposals for you to choose from.
That is more proposals than I think at any other time in the 10 years I've been in my position. I think this is the 5th iteration. I think this is the most proposals we've had, yes.
With the Great Lakes Aviation, the 2 round trips daily to Milwaukee, with obviously a much bigger capacity on the airlines, is that going to have the interline or inline check-in?
Great Lakes does have interline agreements with all 3 of the major carriers, Delta, American, and United.
Okay.
The challenge I see with that is Milwaukee's not a hub for any of those 3. It's not really a hub for anybody anymore. They have a good amount of service, but it's kind of spread across multiple carriers. They are going to be here on Thursday giving their presentation, and I've been told they have some interesting surprises for us. So I'm kind of curious as to what that's going to entail.
Okay.
Because on the surface, Milwaukee doesn't seem like it makes sense to us.
Yeah, well, having flown to Milwaukee many times out of our airport, I'm quite familiar with it.
It certainly makes sense for many people.
It's easy.
But part of, with our current service now, we've had public charters for 6 years, or will be 6 this summer. We've been focusing our marketing effort on really trying to attract tourism from the Chicago area up to northern Michigan.
And that makes sense.
Part of why our seasonal swings are so much. In Milwaukee, we're not going to have that. So Milwaukee is more about servicing the needs of our population via some of that connectivity. It's less about kind of that economic driver of driving tourism to our region.
Well, that
Both
being-
have pros and cons, and, you know, those are things that all need to get weighed in the final process.
Well, with that being said, I'm wondering why you put Midway in front of Detroit then? Why didn't you put O'Hare? I'm just curious.
Right,
That was just a board
because
decision that
in
they
looking
wanted.
at the numbers for other area airports, namely Traverse City, because it's kind of it's similar because of our locality, not necessarily similar for other reasons. Chicago has historically been their top destination into Traverse City, and Detroit has been like number 15. Part of it is that because distance-wise they're about the same, but there's the perception that Detroit's in-state will drive. Chicago, oh, you're going to go from Illinois through Indiana up to Michigan. That's a flying route. It's kind of a perception issue that I think has, at least for Traverse City, generated more tourism demand on the airline from Chicago than from Detroit. That's part of the reason.
Well, good luck. I'm glad to see the proposals. That's good.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Concerns and comments. Citizen comment. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on municipal services, activities, or areas of city involvement. Citizens in attendance shall be recognized by the mayor for comment, limited to 5 minutes. Letters submitted to council will not be publicly read. Are there any citizens that would like to make comment?
Rick Schrock, 603 Harvard Lane. The budget season is here. I know that means hours and hours of work and meeting for you guys, and thank you for that hard work. There's a piece of that budget process that's public input, and I'm going to suggest to you that your budget's timeline is compacted. The city manager's recommendation comes to you, and that gives the public kind of a view of the starting point for discussion of the budget. But there's a short period of time then before the public has the public input time, and that's usually about 2 weeks, as I recall. And that's hard to prepare, to understand, to ask questions, and prepare thoughtful input. It's tight. And you understand that too, because you're putting in lots of long hours and lots of meetings. I know you value public comment. I've watched it in the past, and I know you're interested in thoughtful public comment. And so I'm going to encourage you to, as you look at that process, to spread out that timeline a little bit more. I don't know that there's a magic number for sure. I'd like you to give it more time. I'd suggest maybe rather than a couple weeks, maybe give it a month. You're going to be working on that anyway, but from the time that the first draft of the manager's budget is revealed until the time for public comment, that gives people a little bit more time to look and think and understand. So the goal here would be to have a less compacted schedule, with the result that you get more thoughtful public input on your budget. So I'd like you to consider that, and thank you for the hours and hours of hard work you have coming up.
Thank you, Mr. Strike.
Barry Lind, 532 4th Street. Since he was talking about the budget, that reminds me of something that I thought of after attending the work session last week as it relates to your budget process. In listening through the work session last week, I think it really crystallized in my mind that we just don't have enough dollars for our streets. At best, what I'm hearing is we can maybe maintain status quo, but we're not going to get to the improvements that we need to do without one of two things: either dramatically cutting other things, or trying to focus on additional revenue. And I know a lot of the budget process, you're focusing on the expenses, and those need to be focused on with good reason. Those are taxpayer dollars that you're spending, they need to be spent wisely. But I also I want you as council to think about what is it that we can do maybe to be focusing efforts on trying to increase our tax base such that we can afford the things, because I'm just not sure that we're ever going to be able to cut our way into good streets. I think we need to make sure that we're also doing things to increase our tax base so that we have revenue that we can accomplish what we need to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lind. Are there any other citizens that wish to make comment? If not, we'll move on to officials and staff. City manager,
Nothing at this time.
city attorney,
Nothing, Your Honor, thank you.
city clerk,
Nothing, Your Honor.
public safety director, plans and zoning director, chief financial officer, public works director,
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
city engineer. Council members.
Your Honor.
Councilmember Cooper. Yeah.
Your Honor. This is something new that we're starting this year, and I hope we continue it. We'd like to recognize all our employees, and we're starting with the ones that were hired in January. And I'll read the names off, and you'll get a thank you card, but there won't be no $1 million check in that. Can't do that. Okay, the first one is Cindy Lukovich, 43 years. Doug Dominic, 24 years. David Shands, 17 years. Sean Taylor, 5 years. And Jeremiah Hayner, 1 year. We want to thank you all for your dedicated service to the city of Manistee. And wish Thad Taylor a happy birthday.
Thank you.
I almost forgot.
Happy birthday, Thad. And welcome back, Denise. I've missed you. Glad you're back. That's it.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Thanks to everybody for being here tonight. And happy birthday. At that point, we will go to item D, consideration of a closed session, manager annual evaluation. City Manager Thad N. Taylor has requested a closed session this evening as permitted by the Open Meeting Act, Section 8A, for discussion on the city manager's annual evaluation. At this time, council could take action to proceed to closed session under Section 8A of the Michigan Open Meeting Act.
I'll make the motion. We go to close.
I have a motion by Councilmember Goodspeed, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski. Is there any discussion? City Clerk, would you please take roll?
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Mayor Smith?
Yes. Thank you.
We need a
I'd like to
motion to
make a
come back
motion,
in.
the council go back into open session.
Second.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
We first have to vote on the other one.
Sorry.
I have a motion by Councilmember Goodspeed and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski that we come back into open session. Would you please take roll?
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Beaton?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Mayor Smith?
Yes,
Motion approved.
thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we, by law, hey,